Yeah, I just discovered that little switch can go halfway or it can go all the way. It only went halfway that time. Thank you, Cynthia. What do we believe about Jesus? Let's see. He's the Son of God, second person in the Trinity, and our Savior. He healed people. He rose from the dead, and He walked on water. Let's see, He's the head of the church. He lives in my heart. Now, all of that is true. But isn't it kind of cold, sterile, pale? I mean, what if you asked my daughter, what do you believe about your dad? And she said, well, he's a preacher, a teacher, and a geek. He pastors Hickory Hollow Baptist Church, drives a Camaro, and practices karate. Well, yeah, that's my class this semester at Nashville State. All of that is true. But does that really sound like somebody you know? Does that sound like somebody you might want to get to know? What's missing? How about a glimpse of my personality? The whole point of following Jesus is to become like Jesus. The more we know Jesus, the more like Jesus we can become. One of the ancient church fathers who was involved in a very important theological battle toward the end of the 2nd century, early part of the 3rd century, Athanasius once said, he became what we are, that we might become what He is. But what if the Jesus we know is cold, sterile, pale? At the end of his somewhat eye-opening book about Jesus, John Eldridge wrote, when we hold fast to a bland Jesus, we get a bland church. A two-dimensional Jesus equals two-dimensional Christians. To get a look at who Jesus is, let's go to a place where Jesus loved to go. But now I warn you, it's a place where a lot of believers, a lot of church folks would not want to go. In John chapter 2, we find a Jesus who is bright, shiny, and very much alive. In the 4th book of your New Testament, we will discover that Jesus is an awesome friend to have. Now, I'm going to be reading from the New Living Translation. I got a new one just for the occasion. Verse 1, the next day, some translations render that 3 days later, there was a wedding celebration in the village of Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and His disciples were also invited to the celebration. 3 days, maybe the next day. The Greek is a little indeterminate there. Right after Jesus called His first followers, He and His first followers went to a wedding in Cana of Galilee. You know, when Arlene and I got married years ago, weddings for the most part were simple things. You know, you had the service. You might have a special song. Piano, if you're lucky, organ. And in the reception, that's where you could tell whether they were putting on the dog or not, because if it was a simple wedding, you just had peanuts. If it was an expensive wedding, you had mixed nuts with your mince and wedding cake and punch. Okay. Today, that's pretty much changed. Weddings have become major productions. Sit-down dinners, dancing, a band or a DJ, drinks, hors d'oeuvres, cocktail hours, my soul, driving off in a very expensive limousine or more. But as elaborate as weddings have become today, folks, they still, for the most part, do not hold a candle to the 1st century Jewish wedding. 1st century Jewish weddings involved a feast that could last 8 hours a day, 5 to 7 days a week. Drinking, eating, dancing, and drinking some more. In fact, drinking a lot more. The best foods, the strongest wines were always on the menu. Even the poor folks who couldn't afford 8 to 12-hour feasts would have a banquet every night for 5 nights. Well, this wedding in Cana of Galilee must have been a big shindig, or at least a very big venue. That's the term now. You got to get married at a venue. Because off to one side there were 6 stone, that's hard to say, water pots that were there for washing of hands and feet, and pots and pans. Now, I have heard some teetotaling, evangelistically oriented Baptists actually opine, what was Jesus doing at such a party when he was supposed to save the world? Why wasn't he about his mission? I mean, we even make a big deal. Jesus sanctified the institution of marriage by attending the wedding at Cana of Galilee. That's actually in some wedding ceremonies, like it was such an unusual thing for Jesus to do. Keep that in mind. Verse 3. The wine supply ran out during the festivities, so Jesus' mother told him, they have no more wine. Dear woman, that's not our problem, Jesus replied. My time has not yet come. Now, a little bit of background. Running out of wine at such a big party would have been very, very embarrassing. Especially if this was a fairly wealthy family and the party was going on for several days. This would have been hugely embarrassing. Some people think Mary must have been related to the family. She may even have been the wedding planner. And if that was the case, this was very embarrassing to Jesus' mom. So she came to Jesus with the problem, and Jesus blew her off. Now, Jewish boys did not blow off their moms in public, okay? Now, you just did not do that. But Jesus sounds abrupt, almost rude. Not very nice. Doesn't really fit the picture of Jesus that we've often carried around in our hearts. Unless he was messing with his mom. First of all, dear woman, that sounds abrupt, but in the original language it was an honorific. It should have been, dear woman. Or, this would be an accurate translation, my lady. And then what if, when he got to the next part, there was a twinkle in his eye. And that little mischievous smile that she had seen since he was a little boy came up, and he said, dear lady, what does this have to do with me? It's not yet my time. Apparently, Mary got the message. Look at the next verse. But his mother's told the servants, do whatever he tells you. The Jesus we see here is playful. He's playful. He's yanking his mom's chain. He's giving her a hard time. Now, one of my very, very studious, very scholarly commentaries even said, you know, it really makes me uncomfortable to think that Jesus meant something other than he said. But if you remember communication theory, what we say is only 10% of the communication event. We miss the twinkle, we miss the smile, we miss the tone of voice. I would argue Jesus is being playful here, and if you keep an eye out for it as you read in Jesus' stories, he's playful lots of places. He has a great sense of humor. You would know that, being a 21st century person weaned on late night television. But Jesus' sermons and teachings are littered with jokes. Most of them are what we would call, scholarly term here, hyperbolic exaggerations. That was the humor of the day. Yeah, you see that rich dude over there? Jesus said. Well, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of the needle than for a rich man to go to heaven. And the crowd just lost it. The crowd went wild, laughing. And you know how he loved to stick it to the Pharisees. Yeah, those Pharisees, they're such sticks in the mud. Why? They straighten out a gnat and swallow a camel. Oh, Jesus, you're such a card. And then they're cracking up. But once we recognize that Jesus is playful, suddenly a lot of what he did makes better sense. For example, stormy sea, disciples about to sink. Jesus comes walking up like it's, Sunday morning on a sidewalk. Don't be afraid, it's me. Peter says, well, if it's you, command me to get Peter, speaking before thinking. Command me to come out to you. Jesus knows what's going to happen. So, with a smile on his face, he says, all right, come on. And Peter steps out, gets 2 steps, down he goes with, Charlie the tuna. And Jesus pulls him up. And, I could just see him going, you faithless man, why did you doubt? Playful. Some 15,000 people have been with him for 3 days. They were hungry. So how does he feed them? Does he order out? No. Small boy sandwich. Playful. Do you remember the time there was a blind man in Jerusalem? So what does Jesus do? He kneels down, spits on the ground, makes mud out of the spit and the dust. And then he applies it liberally to the guy's eyes and tells him to go wash in a fountain. Now, come on. That's never made sense to you if you thought about it. He didn't even have to touch the dude to heal him. But if you picture Jesus with an impish smile on his face and his disciples chuckling, suddenly it makes sense. He's playful. You want another example? Jesus arranged for a fish to swallow a coin so that Peter could catch the fish, retrieve the coin, and pay the annual temple tax. Come on! Playful. Jesus is playful. Who do you think teaches monkeys and puppies how to play? Okay. He's playful. Secondly, we're looking at his personality. He's powerful. Now I realize this goes without saying, but let's say it anyway. Look at verse 9. And we're going to skip around just a little bit in the text. When the master of ceremonies tasted the water that was now wine, not knowing where it had come from, though of course the servants knew, he called the bridegroom over to brag to him and brag on him. Jesus is powerful. Now, folks, come on, let's quit being Sunday schoolers here. Let's look at it like it's real. 2 things we need to make wine. We need grapes and time for the grape juice to ferment. Jesus needed neither. This was a mighty miracle he performed, readjusting the molecules of the H2O to be really good wine. That's power with a capital P, folks. The guy we know, the guy that lives in our hearts, commands the elements of the universe. He actually created those elements. He's powerful. Water and wine. Now, as I said earlier, it would have been very embarrassing for a well-to-do family to run out of wine at any point during their week-long wedding party. And if Mary was the hostess of the wedding planner, it would have been extremely embarrassing for Jesus' mom. So Jesus did what Jesus does. He stepped in and he stepped up. Look at verses 6 to 8. Standing nearby were 6 stone water jars used for Jewish ceremonial washing. Each could hold 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus told the servants, fill the jars with water. When the jars had been filled, he said, now dip some out and take it to the master of ceremonies. So the servants followed his instructions. Man, Jesus didn't go halfway here, did he? 6 30-gallon jars could hold 180 gallons of water, which Jesus turned into wine. 180 gallons of wine equals about 682 liters of wine, or 908 bottles of wine. Shoot, that even beats the old song, 99 bottles of beer on the wall, 99 bottles of beer, okay? I mean, talk about just going whole hog. Now, I did the math. I did the math, and I discovered that just one of those stone pots would have produced about 150 bottles of really good wine. Wouldn't that have been enough? Now, why did he turn so much water into wine? Well, someone might say, well, because it was the beginning of the festivities and they needed more wine. Well, that doesn't make sense. In fact, the master of ceremonies actually says most folks bring out the good wine first. You save the best till last. We tend to think in terms of, well, it's one night. Nah. If he's saved the best till last, it may very well be the last night of the feast when it's all wrapping up. And you know, you want to leave them, the last thing they experience is the last thing they remember. So why did he make so much wine if it was indeed the last night of the party? Well, maybe he thought they could sell the wine to help pay for the wedding, or maybe to give the bride and groom a nest egg to get started in life. The Jesus we see here, playful, powerful, and extravagantly generous. He's extravagantly generous. Think about some of our favorite miracles. He fed 15,000 people. And there were 12 large baskets full of leftovers. A few weeks, or maybe a few months later, he fed about 12,000 people, and there were 7 large baskets full of leftovers. Jesus is extravagantly generous. Now, Jesus has always met my needs, financially, socially, etc. I have experienced his extravagant generosity on numerous occasions. The first time that really put it on the map for me, I had gone off to college. God called me to preach, so I had to go to college. I had to go to a Baptist college. And so I worked for a year in a lumber mill to save up money for tuition, books, housing. Well, after a year away, that money was gone. My parents couldn't help me. And out of left field, I got a federal scholarship that paid my tuition, books, and housing and fees for the remainder of my college. I graduated debt-free from college. We've experienced it off and on over the years, but we experienced it again in a big way about 6 years ago. When Catherine was 5 or 6, we got an inheritance. We used half of it to buy a decent car. We put the other half in a mutual fund for Catherine's future college education. And over the 10 or 12 years, it doubled in size. And we had enough money in that mutual fund to pay for 4 years of college when 2007 and the recession hit. And in just 2 weeks, that account was cut in half. And it was still going down when I pulled it out. Well, 2010, she graduated from high school, went off to college, had enough money to pay for 2 full years. At the end of 2 full years, we had about enough for the next semester, and we weren't sure what we were going to do. Well, every summer or fall, I have a retreat where I go away, pray, plan my preaching, and fast, and just seek God. And I was talking to him about it. I said, God, I don't know what we're going to do. I do not want to take out a loan. I do not want to go any deeper in debt. We're not using lottery money. Lord, what are we going to do? And God, in one of those remarkable God moments that I wish there were more of, but boy, they're wonderful when they come, said, don't worry about it. I'm going to take care of it. And I took care of it. You have that peace that passes understanding? And he did take care of it. Not in the way I expected. Erlene and I got a financial windfall. And no, we did not win the lottery. We don't play the lottery. Neither of us has a rich uncle who died and left us money, but we got a windfall that not only paid for Catherine's remaining 2 years of college, it also paid off our house, paid off our credit cards. Jesus is extravagantly generous. Playful, powerful, extravagantly generous, and a party animal. You say, wait a minute, what? Did you say Jesus is a party animal? Hang on. Look at the text. Look at the text. Verse 10. Remember, the master of ceremonies called the bridegroom over, and even though there are other people running the show, it ultimately comes to the bridegroom. A host always serves the best wine first, he said. Then when everyone has had a lot to drink, he brings out the less expensive wine, but you have kept the best until now. This miraculous sign at Cana in Galilee was the first time Jesus revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. Jesus turned the water into really, really good wine. And I'm just going to tell you, that makes a lot of teetotaling Baptists uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable. And not just Baptists. I have multiple commentaries on John's history of the life of Jesus on my shelf. Fully half of those authors simply could not believe that Jesus would do such a thing, and they did everything in their power to figure out a way around it. First time I even knew people question that interpretation, I went to seminary. Dr. Clayton Herrick, a famous New Testament scholar, Greek scholar, had written his own Greek textbook, did the most amazing Greek tap dance on the word dip out that I have ever seen, to argue that the servants actually dipped water out of the well and took that cup to the master of ceremonies, and the cup is all that was turned into wine. Which led to a saying among my seminary friends: Jesus turned the water into wine, and Southern Baptists turned it back. I'm sorry. If you have to do a tap dance to get the meaning you want out of the text, I just don't think that's a safe way to interpret Scripture. I think the obvious, if John had meant that, I think he would have been clear about that. I think the obvious interpretation is Jesus turned a whole lot of water into a whole lot of really, really expensive wine. And the party, which may have been winding down at that point, I am quite sure kicked into high gear when they brought out the good stuff. Now, I know you teetotaling Baptists don't know about that, but I didn't grow up in a Christian home, and I remember what happened when the good stuff came out. I was a kid, so I wasn't having any of it, but I saw what it did to the party. Now, I'll grant you, it may make us a little uncomfortable to think of Jesus as a party animal because of some of the connotations there. But the New Testament makes it clear that Jesus loved a good party. He sure went to them a lot. He called Matthew to join his band of merry men. Matthew the reprobate, Matthew the traitor, the tax collector. And so what did Matthew do? He threw a party, brought in all of his reprobate buddies to meet Jesus, and Jesus went. Simon the leper, whom Jesus probably healed, threw Jesus a big party. Mary, Martha, and Lazarus threw at least 2 parties that we know of, maybe more. And Jesus regularly went to parties thrown by people like that old reprobate Zacchaeus and other tax collectors and other sinful people. Why? He wasn't a discriminator of persons. He even went to parties with Pharisees. Yeah, even Pharisees threw parties. Jesus liked a good party. Unlike his cousin John. Remember John the Baptist? You may not have made the connection. They're cousins. Well, in Matthew chapter 11, Jesus referred to his cousin John, who apparently was something of stuffed shirt. Something of a stick in the mud. He said, "For John didn't spend his time eating and drinking, and you say, he's possessed by a demon. The Son of Man," referring to himself in third person, "the Son of Man, on the other hand, feasts and drinks, and you say, well, he's a glutton and a drunkard, and a friend of tax collectors and other sinners." Irreligious folks love to be around Jesus because Jesus was fun to be around. Now, I've been around some religious people, and I've got to tell you, if you go into a party all spiritual and you kill that party, I got to wonder how spiritual are you really. Certainly Jesus didn't kill parties. They'd stop inviting him. Jesus liked a good party. Just like his heavenly Father. Okay, I haven't seen the eyebrows. Wait. God likes a good party? Oh, yes. Oh, yes. In Deuteronomy 14. Janice is going off. In Deuteronomy 14, verse 22, Moses gave the children of Israel some instructions about bringing the tithe to the temple. You must set aside a tithe of your crops, 1/10 of all the crops you harvest each year. Bring this tithe to the designated place of worship, the place the Lord your God chooses for his name to be honored, Jerusalem, and eat it there in his presence. This applies to your tithes of grain, wine, olive oil, and the firstborn males of your flocks and herds. Doing this will teach you always to fear the Lord your God. Now, when the Lord your God blesses you with a good harvest, the place of worship he chooses for his name to be honored might be too far for you to bring the tithe. If so, you may sell the tithe portion of your crops and herds, put the money in a pouch, and go to the place the Lord your God has chosen. When you arrive, you may use the money to buy any kind of food you want. Cattle, goats, sheep, wine, or other alcoholic drink. Now, I looked at other translations. Some say wine, strong drink. One even said wine or beer. Then feast there in the presence of the Lord your God and celebrate with your household. Oh, and do not neglect the Levites in your town, for they will receive no allotment of land among you. They were to leave a portion of their tithe with the Levites, but the majority of it, sell it, go to Jerusalem, throw a whiz-bang party. If you read the Torah carefully, you'll discover a majority of the worship that they had involved sacrificing an animal, roasting it over an open flame, and eating it as a big party with God as the guest of honor. Jesus was partying. Now, I've heard believers say, I can't go to parties with my unchurched friends because I might do what they do. Now, if you're a baby Christian or you have a weakness in that area, you know, if we used to go to cast parties where Arlene works, you know, cast parties, Christmas parties, and there would be alcohol, and we just turn our wine glass upside down, you know, so we, you know, have a Coke. But if you've got a weakness in that area, then that's a valid concern. And certainly as believers, we don't want to be at a party that's so rowdy that the cops are called or where they're doing illegal stuff. Okay? But if we're spiritually mature, then why not go to the company Christmas party or a cast party or a dinner party? I mean, Jesus went to parties with really bad folks. Never did anything wrong and still had a good time. Yeah, but preacher, what about my reputation? Funny thing, Jesus earned a bad reputation. But the only people that cared that he went to parties with irreligious people were the religious people, the Pharisees. And if you read the stories of Jesus, who were the bad guys? The Pharisees, who thought they were better than everybody else. Looking for an excuse to feel better than everybody else. Jesus didn't care what they thought. People who are like Jesus should be a lot of things. But I gotta tell you, at the top of the list, they ought to be fun to be around. Are you fun to be around? If not, do we know Jesus? I mean, really, do we know Jesus? What do we believe about Jesus? Have we seen the real Jesus? Or have we bought into the traditional, sterile, boring, religious Jesus? There was an interesting quote in Eldridge's book. He said, Jesus is the most spiritual man who ever lived. He was not religious. He was not religious. The Pharisees were the religious ones. Are we becoming like Jesus? Like his personality? I gotta wonder. Because study after study over the last 10 or so years has found that the unchurched and irreligious people are impressed with Jesus, even attracted by and to Jesus, but they're turned off by church folk. They're turned off by church folk. And I've read at least 2 different books that cited studies that found that a majority of millennials find Christians to be annoying. anointing. Perhaps the problem is that the picture of Jesus many believers hold is more tradition than biblical. Perhaps it's fuzzy, unclear, or just plain wrong. Once we meet the Jesus of the New Testament, then we can become like Him. And I want to tell you, when we become like Jesus, then we will be an awesome friend to have. Let's pray. Lord, help us to see Jesus as He is, as He was on earth. And God, the Bible teaches that you, in your essence, do not change. Same yesterday, today, and forever. In fact, it says that of Jesus. It's same yesterday, today, and forever. So what He was on earth, He is now. And I would argue, God, what He was on earth is what He was before He came. We just needed a fuller picture. God, over the centuries, we have turned Jesus into some kind of sterilized, stained glass figure. We never laughed. We never had a good time. Never smiled. Was always telling people, shape up, or ship out. None of that's in Scripture. Help us to see Jesus with open eyes and open hearts, that we may actually become like Jesus. The unchurched and irreligious love to be around Jesus. They invited Him where they were, or they followed where He was. I see a lot of that happening today, with little Jesuses running around where they work, where they go to school. Help us to be like Jesus. In whose name we pray. Amen. When I first started walking with Jesus, there was something of a theological debate among believers, not necessarily theologians, but believers. And the question was asked, did Jesus ever laugh? And nobody knew. I think it was, and I only know this from watching Culture, okay? All right? But I think it was in an issue of Playboy magazine where the